I'm Bob Crawford.
I'm Ben Sawyer.
And this is The Road to Now.
Yes, it is. Roads abound, Bob. Roads abound between you and your career.
You know, I'm a kind of a busy person. I'm involved in some things. I got a couple things going on. We both do. We both do. Well, one of the things I have going on that you and I haven't really discussed at length is I am on the board of an organization called the Folk Americana Roots Hall of Fame. We like to call it FARHOF. And it is this, it has given to me more than I could have imagined, because it's really connected me the roots of the music that my band plays. And I've been a lifelong lover of music. So I thought today we would have the founder of this organization, Joe Spaulding, and the current president of the organization, Casey Soward, on to discuss FARHOF. So, because I think more people need to learn about this organization.
You know, I am tangential to this, but I am very excited about what's going on as a historian and a big fan of music. This sounds like a cool thing to be a part of, Bob.
By the way, you can now tell that Ben reads the articles for The Atlantic because he used the word tangential. I can't even say that word.
That's right.
But one of the things Ben has going on is if you listen to the Atlantic's articles, you will hear the melodious voice of Ben Sawyer reading them to you.
A melodious voice that has no business singing, Bob. So let's get back to what matters.
Let's welcome our guests, Joe Spaulding and Casey Soward from the Folk Americana Roots Hall of Fame. Hey guys, welcome to The Road to Now.
Glad to be here, Bob.
Thanks for having us.
And the first voice you heard was Joe's there, and the second one was Casey, just for everybody listening to keep him straight.
Thank you, Ben, for doing that. So Joe, I want to start with you because when I first heard of FARHOF, I was like, well, folk is a genre. Americana is a genre. Roots music, we could say, is a genre. But you know what you've kind of like brilliantly allowed us to do is look at how these are all one thing. So talk about that. Talk about the idea for FARHOF and talk about these genres and how you envisioned this thread.
Well, so, one, Bob, it's really great to be here and to admire what you do. And yes, you are very busy. And yes, you play bass in one of my favorite bands. So how cool is that? But back in around 2016, 17, I started thinking about, what more could the Boch Center do to make itself be a little bit, we're not just a place.
And just for clarity, the Boch Center.
Yes.
Explain that.
Boch Center is a performing arts center in Boston, Massachusetts, which my friend Casey is now the president and CEO of, and I was the president and CEO of for almost 40 years. And it is got two major theaters, one called the Wang Theater and one called the Schubert Theater. The Wang Theater is 3,500 and something seats, and the Schubert is around 1,500 seats. And we're not just a place for the performing arts. We really like to be a leader in our community and want to support the arts in every single way that we can. We have a very large education program that's very successful and a number of other initiatives that we do. So back around then, I just started trying to think about what more could we do as an institution that would make us a little different than anyone else, instead of, just being a venue. And I was a folk artist myself, Bob, way back in what was known as the late 60s, and actually recorded my first album and toured as a singer-songwriter. And so folk music was something that was really important to me. And as you fast forward through history and the time, all of a sudden, it became something that, well, listen, folk music actually came from roots music. And roots was the really that was where it started. You mixed it up in the bowl of gumbo and that's what came out.
So help us define roots music. I know it's kind of one of the things, these things where you, as that Supreme Court justice said, you know it when you see it.
Well, that's true. But the roots music, or hear it, but roots music was sort of came from Appalachia, came from all over the world. It germinated itself in many different styles, and it was all about storytelling. And from those storytelling, a lot of great artists, including artists that we inducted into the first class in 24, came from that era. And yet they were leaders in their time, and musicians today who are in rock and roll, or they're in music that you do, Bob, or whatever that form is, that they look back and say a lot of this came from those roots musicians. And those musicians then grew to an era called folk music, in my opinion. But folk music also came from Ireland and came across. So it was all germinating. And then as time went on, where Ben lives in Nashville, all of a sudden there's the Americana Music Festival, right? And my friend Jed Hilly, who also happens to be a part of our Hall of Fame, once described to me, he said, "No, folk is old, Joe, and Americana is new." And I said, "Well, I kind of beg to differ on that." And we argued back and forth. And then as time went on, and you realize that the band and Joni Mitchell and Neil Young, especially those three, all came from Canada. And so they couldn't call themselves American artists. They were now Americana artists representing North America. So as time went on, all of these genres sort of ended up in the same place in the conversation, Bob. That's how it really sort of germinated. So you would go out and say, "Listen, I'm thinking of creating the Folk Music Hall of Fame." And somebody would say, "Oh, no, 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 no. You can't, you got to remember roots music." And then I said, "Oh, Christ, we're going to have to add the word roots." And then someone said, "Well, you can't do that. All the new artists are Americana artists." And I would say, "No, they're not all American artists." But we then had to get to a point where all of a sudden it was Folk Americana Roots Hall of Fame. Big word. So we decided to shorten it to FARHOF. And FARHOF sort of rolls off the tongue and feels pretty good. And it represents that genre and that bowl that just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And by the way, continues today. And I think it's more relevant today than practically the last 25 years. So I think it's an exciting piece. So we then started to look into where to do that, Bob. And, I went to visit my friends at the Country Music Hall of Fame, or the Grammy Museum, or the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, or a number of them, the Blues Hall of Fame. And every single one of them said, "Wow, listen, the one thing you should never do is build a building." And I was at that time looking for a building because I thought we had to do it somewhere else. And then that's where we were doing a Neil Young concert that Casey remembers, which we've done several of them at the center. And I was sort of talking to him about this idea. And on that night, on the first night he got on stage, he said, "Listen, I just want everybody to know that Boston is the folk capital of North America." North America, he said. I thought that was interesting, right?
Yeah, he's from Canada,
he was a
right?
Canadian artist.
Yeah.
And then I said, "Well, second night you did the same thing." So I said to him, "So that's really nice of you to do. And so I'm thinking of doing this Hall of Fame, and I'm looking for a building." He said, "Why would you do that? Why don't you just do it right here in the Wang Theater?" And then all of a sudden, that was a brilliant idea. And then we began to look, could we actually do a Hall of Fame in a living, breathing performing arts center? And the answer was yes. And that's how we got started.
And Neil Young is right. The argument can be made, right? Because there are, like, I'm thinking of Club Passim. Am I saying it right?
Club 47, but Club
47.
Passim called today. Yeah.
Okay. There are incredible roots to that, to the Bob Dylan and Joan Baez. Am I right? Casey, can you get in here and confirm this for us?
No, absolutely. I mean, Boston, it's such an important place in the music, but also just in the culture nationally, right? Where you've got people that come here from all over the world to go to college. They come here, they learn, they get together, and what results is an incredible. Boston has an incredible impact on thought leadership. Whether it's music, academics, everything, and so for us, being able to, find a home that celebrates that with FARHOF, I think is really, really important. And the beautiful thing about that is that that's the part that continues to evolve today, where we're honoring the tradition and what's happened here, but it's happening every day in the city of Boston. And as we look at the next kind of 2.0 version of FARHOF, where we're taking it, focusing on that piece of it as a connective tissue through the history, is really, really exciting.
When I think of this, right, it makes sense to me historically that Boston would be a center here. Why is it, do you think, that when we think about these other genres, we don't think about, I mean, really, even I think the Northeast, if in maybe New York City sometimes, but, we think about Nashville or Muscle Shoals or, the hills of the Appalachians. Why do you think Boston's been so kind of left out of the narrative?
I think that Boston, we haven't been great about promoting it in the past. And I think that's the brilliance of Joe's idea, is that, Boston is great at promoting things like sports. We've got amazing shoe companies. We've got biotech. We've got all these great industries here, but music is one of the most deep, and we have not been good at promoting it. And I think it's kind of that simple. What do you think, Joe? You've been around it a lot longer.
I would agree. And Ben, you're a doctor of history, and history in Boston has always been the Revolutionary War and the shot heard round the world and all that stuff. But there were more acts signed out of Boston back in my day when I was a musician than almost anywhere else in the world at that time. And, Nashville was just coming into its own. I shouldn't say coming into its own, but, it was growing. But, I think that the musicians that we honored all came to Boston, and they all went through Club Passim, or what Club 47, now Passim. And they were able to make a living doing that in Boston, which is an amazing thing to think about. And it continues today. So Casey's doing all kinds of shows including Bob's band coming up in June, that is perpetuating that. And there are so many. I mean, Berkeley. Casey is a graduate of Berkeley College of Music. I mean, that's one of the best music colleges in the country, right? And has actually satellite colleges all over the world. So I think I think Casey's right. So part of what we're doing is trying to celebrate that. And we're also trying to say, quite frankly, that arts and music is the foundation of a civilized society. And we believe that at the Boch Center, and we promote that every single day. That's what we do. And so to be able to perpetuate this kind of involvement of artists, and including today that I think many of those artists that we recognized back in 2024 were considered, they were protest music. And in many cases, they were banned in America. Some of them had to, go overseas. And yet, people like Leadbelly, artists today, including the Rolling Stones, would say, if it wasn't for Leadbelly, there would be no Rolling Stones, right? And if it wasn't for some of the other artists we've done, there'd be no skiffle music. And that made Van Morrison famous. So, I mean, you just go on and on and on. Boston can perpetuate that. We're a major performing arts center. And so that's what FARHOF is doing.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wondered how much you guys were nagged by that whole being the hotbed of the American Revolution thing. It seems like that is where Boston holds our imagination. But as you said, I mean, there's a case to be made that the securing liberty then creates the circumstances in which we can have civilized society. So there's a narrative there.
So the first class, you talked about 2024. I think it's class of 2023 announced in 2024. Joe, is that right?
Well, we had the ceremony in April of 24.
So here's the first class, and it breaks it down into legacy artists. So Gordon Lightfoot, Gene Ritchie, John Prine, Johnny Cash, Josh White, Leadbelly, Odetta, Oscar Brand, who I want to come back to in a minute, Pete Seeger, Richie Havens, Woody Guthrie. Now, there are living artists and there are non-musicians that we can talk about here in a second. But let's talk about this first group.
Yeah.
Because this is the foundation. Because a skeptic would be like, well, what folk Americana roots I spent a lot of time in Memphis. There's a Blues Hall of Fame there. I've been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Woody Guthrie Museum is great out there in Tulsa. I mean, there are so many of these kinds of places. So I think that talk about this initial group of legacy artists to kind of like put down a marker, be like, okay, this is when I give you this idea of FARHOF, this is what I'm talking about. You can see it and hear it now.
That is correct. And that's exactly right. So the first one you mentioned was Gordon Lightfoot, Canadian. All right. But, these particular artists really changed the world. And as you know, you named them all off, Bob, and there's 11 of them. And believe me, I know that there's 11 of them because I've studied a lot, but there's 11 of them. And I want you to know that every single one, except for one of these, all the families of all these legacy artists came to Boston for our induction ceremony. And for the first time, they all knew of each other's families, but they'd never met them families, or many have never met. And all of a sudden, here they were in the Wang Theater as a family of honorees on how this music had changed the world. And weren't we lucky to have that happen? So again, here's a perfect example. The process is one, Bob, that you know, but we created.
It's rigorous. It's rigorous, right?
Right. It's rigorous.
The process. It is not. Yeah.
We created a nominating committee and this, and we went out and everybody got to submit names. We had hundreds of names, and then you've culled it all down. And these are people that had tons of votes. This was the class that really changed.
So this is a lot. These artists are all really historically, like musically historically rooted, right? And so there's a few names I don't think people have heard of. I think a lot. We've had Woody Guthrie's daughter on this program here. Pete Seeger, I think everybody knows Pete Seeger. Definitely Johnny Cash, John Prine, who we just lost a few years ago. Gordon Lightfoot, who we lost last year. But just for a second. Talk about Josh White, because am I wrong? Did Josh White play at the White House with Roosevelt? Didn't Roosevelt?
Absolutely, and so Josh White also, at some particular point, was along with Leadbelly and even others on this list were considered communists, and were banned in some cases, but you take people like Josh White. Josh White was, a fabulous one. And by the way, his son, Josh White Jr., came to our induction ceremony and did his last performance. He did a great song, The House of the Rising Sun, and about a month later, he passed away. And so we felt very lucky that had happened. And so, Odetta was the same way. Gene Ritchie was the same way. I mean, so I think it was important that we honored these people together. And yes, you are correct that a lot of younger people today, which is what the harder thing for us to do, is how do we get younger artists, the future artists. You mentioned some of these people, and they don't know who these artists are at all.
Well, I'm going to confess I know a little bit about Oscar Brand, but someone from the Massachusetts Historical Society sent me a song about John Quincy Adams, a campaign song from 1824, recorded by Oscar Brand.
Correct.
And I researched this. Oscar Brand did an album, at least one album, and he went back, Ben, and he recorded Tippecanoe and Tyler too, and there's a song about Jefferson, and all of these campaign songs going back to the beginning of the nation. You need to check it out, Ben.
I think I have heard it. I think he gets into some of the later ones too, didn't he? He laid down the Jimmy Carter's
Yes.
campaign song. Ooh.
Yes.
I think I don't know the exact number, but I think it's well over 100 albums on a number of subject matters. He could do Broadway, he could do whatever it was, and yes, and so actually hanging in our ledges, I don't know if it's still there, Casey, or not, was Oscar Brand's guitar that he used on many of that.
Hey, Casey, let me ask you, the non-performers.
Yes.
Talk about the significance of these, and Albert Grossman is one, Betsy Siggins and George Ween. Talk about the importance, and this is only again, there has been a new class just announced, and we're going to talk about them. Talk about the importance of adding a non-performer category to this Hall of Fame.
I think it's really important, Bob, because it adds another dimension to this. You know, as Joe and I know, and you know, we all know that there are so many people involved in making concerts happen, and this industry is just full of people that work behind the scenes. They work tirelessly, whether they're on stage, they're backstage, they're making phone calls, they're making it, the people that really make it happen. And so this shines a light on some of those folks. I mean, someone like George Ween, you know, who basically invented the modern festival, or Betsy Siggins, who's our, you know, kind of queen of folk here in Boston. I think it's very important, you know, that we're paying tribute to these folks. So I love that we have the category this year in our new class. We have John Hammond and Alan Lomax in that category. I mean, two just titans, and I think it will allow us a lot of flexibility in the future, you know, to get very creative about who gets into that category, which is exciting.
The thing it's in my mind right now that I'm wondering is, so you have this entire space here, and you've talked about some of these figures, and the first thing that pops into my mind is what are your exhibits? What do they look like, and how are you shaping the space in a way to tell these stories?
You know, that's an evolving piece at FARHOF, you know, and I have to give credit to Joe and his vision, you know, for really laying that foundation. I mean, first of all, if you've never been to the Wang Theater, you have to come and see it. And we offer tours of the Wang Theater, you know, whether they're guided tours, we have exhibit only tours. But if you come to Boston, it's truly a magnificent wonder. You know, National Historic Landmark Theater. And when it was built 100 years ago, and the lobby was built to be so big that you could accommodate every person that was in the orchestra into the lobby. So that the seating capacity was 5,000, and you could put 5,000 in the lobby. So we have all this gorgeous giant space there where we can have exhibits and other types of events. In fact, the first FARHOF induction ceremony took place just in the lobby of the Wang Theater. That's the size and the grandeur of the theater. So starting with that base, you know, Joe had the foresight to put permanent exhibits on the third and fourth floors, you know, and as well as in the lower lobby and in a smaller room called the music hall, which is now kind of houses all of the inductees. You know, so we have an exhibit down in the music hall. It's called Legends, and it pays tribute to each new class of inductees. We have a rotating exhibit that's directly adjacent to that, where we'll have two exhibits a year. We just opened a brand new exhibit called Music America, which is aligned with the America 250. We've partnered with the Bruce Springsteen Center for American Music in Monmouth, New Jersey, who has curated this gorgeous exhibit. It's got, you know, everything from ukuleles that World War I soldiers played together, you know, to keep them united during World War I, all the way through today, where we have stage costumes from Lady Gaga, Prince, Elvis. You know, it really shows you kind of the totality of American music starting in the 1600s. So that, I think, and as Joe, you know, as we talked about the origins of American music, it all ties back to folk Americana and roots. And so you know, so some people may say, well, you're showing a Lady Gaga stage costume. What does that have to do with it? Well, it has everything to do with it, right? Because if you learn and you understand the history, which is what our job is, then you can make those connections more easily. So the exhibits are a very important part of what we do.
We can't talk about exhibits without mentioning the name Deana McCloud.
Yeah,
Correct.
I saw that.
No, you can't.
And we had her on for the Woody Guthrie Center. When we did that, we visited her and did a great episode with her. And when I heard that she was coming to FARHOF, I was like, that's a coup. That is a coup to bring her in. Talk about Deana and some of the exhibits she has put together, because she is the best in the business.
So I'll start with that and let Casey finish it. But when I was starting, Bob, on this whole idea, the idea was to go out and meet a lot of people and sort of hear what's happening. So I was in Nashville in 2016, 17, 18, or whatever it was. And I was at Americana Music Festival. And I'm just doing the rounds and I'm watching what's going on and I'm trying to pay attention and trying to meet people. And there's this woman named Deana McCloud, and she kept showing up everywhere. And at that time, she was at the Woody Guthrie Museum in Tulsa. And by the way, she still lives in Tulsa. But I say her second home is now Boston. But so you said, well, went around just like you said, Bob. Anybody heard of this Deana McCloud? Oh my God, Deana McCloud! You got to meet Deana McCloud. So I made an appointment to meet Deana McCloud. And Deana McCloud said, "Oh, I'm at the Woody Guthrie Museum, and but I'm happy to help out and talk about it. And yes, here's what my vision might be, and so on and so on." And then we sort of lucked out that she ended up leaving the Woody Guthrie Museum, and she joined forces with Bob Santilli from the Grammy Museum and rock and roll. And Paul Allen's pop music one in Seattle as well. And Bob and she sort of created the Museum Collective. And we now, I don't know, Casey, we're probably into our 8th or 9th exhibit.
I think that's right, Joe. Yep.
Put together, from Joan Baez to the Folk Collective to the band to the, to what she's doing now. And that's grown too, because Bob has now become the executive director of the Bruce Springsteen Archives and Center for American Music. And so we all sort of live in this wonderful little world. So we feel very honored that we have the very best of the curators who are well respected out there in the industry. And that's a very important part, Bob, because one other thing, all the memorabilia that we have or that we started with were all donated by the musicians themselves. Okay. We didn't buy anything. We didn't have to rent anything. They all came and gave it. Why? Because it was in a place that they loved, that they have played many times over the years. So, it was kind of nice to have Tom Rush deliver his guitar that, started me in this business. And that was a guitar with a naked woman on the fret that I loved that guitar. And it's now hung on the 3rd floor. And the same thing with Tom Schultz's guitar from Boston. And so everybody participated. Even Peter Wolf drove down and delivered his stuff from Jay Giles. And then I had to call him back and say, you forgot the shoes. And he had to turn around, drive back and bring the shoes back. So, I think we have this ability to attract that. Truthfully, Bob, I think that's one of the reasons we were able to get you to join on board. This was basically your Hall of Fame.
Well, Diane Blagman brought this to me. She's a good friend of mine, Diane Blagman, who you talk about like being the interconnectedness, and there are some people who are connectors, and she's like the center. She's the center of the wheel.
Yep.
And we are all only like 2 degrees from Diane Blagman in this world. Is kind of the I think a saying I've heard from someone.
And she is also on the board.
That's right. That's right. And when Diane Blagman suggests I do something, I typically do it. I do it if I can. So historic preservation. When you guys are talking about the museum collective and all these different centers across the country that are like different and specialized, but interwoven. I'm looking at I think about this generation, your generation, Joe. And what I am sensing and observing is you guys are preserving, your time here, which I hope is long.
Thank you.
But you guys are all looking around and you're going, we need to preserve this for the next generation and the generation after that and the generation after that. And what I love about this is I love the Smithsonian. But as we've seen, we need to privatize this stuff. I can't believe that, I'm saying let's privatize things. But this is what we need for historic preservation, because we need it to be in the hands of the people who love it rather than to be overseen by a regime that can turn it off and on at will. So talk about that, like, you're in like that idea, the idea of and the work of preserving and how challenging that can be.
Well, I'll start and let Casey finish, but You are totally right on. So I'm 75, and I am the oldest male Spaulding that has ever lived. My father died at 60, my grandfather at 59, and my great-grandfather at 55. And I've made it to 75 thanks to medicine uh, and and uh, and good doctors. Thank the Lord. But what makes us the best of the preservers, Bob, is that our Hall of Fame is in a living, breathing performing arts center that has, you know, hundreds of thousands of people going through it every single day to see shows. So think of it as you're coming to see a performance and you're seeing a particular artist that you
Maybe
want.
you're seeing, Joe, maybe you're seeing the Avett Brothers open for Ringo Starr.
Exactly. But while the Avett Brothers are there on June 2nd, there are 3,500 other people who are wandering in the building to see you perform on the stage. But when they go to the third floor, or they go to the lower lobby, or they go to the fourth floor, or they go to the music hall, what are they seeing on the walls? What they're seeing is reminding them how important music was to their lives. All right. And that is the case also what Casey continues to do with our education program all the way down to little kids. Right. And and so it's a perpetual a wheel that does that. And sometimes places like Smithsonian, you're exactly right. We happen to be in a living, breathing place where all the arts happen all the time, right? You don't come at 8 in the morning and you shut it down at 5. It's going 24/7. And that is, I think, what really offsets us on that and makes us a little different than our sisters and brothers around the country.
Casey?
Yes, no, I agree with Joe 100%. Making it accessible, is a huge part of it. And the one thing Joe didn't talk about was the tours program, which I had mentioned a little bit earlier, but part of this initiative that's really important is for us to showcase not only the history of the theater itself, 100-year-old building, just an amazing architectural gem, but then alongside it, this musical history that it has played an important part of. And I think a lot of people forget that in the 1960s and 70s, it was the Boston Music Hall, and so many of these acts that we're honoring now in FARHOF played there not just once, but like the Grateful Dead played there like 20 times, and during that time period. And the history we've unearthed during this last 100th year, we just put out a new book, Bob and Ben, that we'll send you both a copy as your lovers of history, just about the history of the Wang Theater. And so it's really this parallel that we can draw between the theater history, the history of music, why these things are important, and preserve that for the next generation and inspire the next generation. And the next generation, the good news is that they love it. And Joe said, that this moment is so important for folk music in particular, and it is. And we're seeing so many amazing young people take up the mantle of folk music, of protest music, of care for the environment. I mean, the social issues of our day are being put into song, and we're helping remind them that this has been the way it always has been, and that this is important that it continues.
Yes, I do feel obligated to say here, maybe the better choice for dealing with the Smithsonian would be to put effective checks and balances on the federal government so that the whims of an executive cannot be victimize all of the people. But
Well, I would agree with that, Ben, tremendously. So yeah, I'll take the hit on that one.
thank
all right?
you. There's a role for the great work you're doing privately, but I think I'm a big checks and balances person. But back to
Well,
it.
we're a not-for-profit organization, so we accept donations, and so it's a particularly hard time right now in our world. And you look at, yeah, isn't it great that we have a documentary on PBS on our induction Hall of Fame, and our first ceremony, and it's still, getting huge traction almost a year and a half later, over a year and a half later, and it's now been seen over 800 times around the country. And the reason for that is it speaks to what's happening, right? So what's happening in this world right now makes what we started in 2018 that much more important in 2026.
Yes, this is the ways that, even those of us trying outside the realms of government to continue and preserve history find our lives harder whenever people don't value that or want one particular story. I did have one question for you though. This building sounds fantastic to me, and it sounds like 100 years ago. So this is one of these robber baron funded. Is this where it came from? What's the origins of it? Is this one of these? We're going to leave an endowment to say we're sorry for all the money we took from everybody kind of projects, or was it a private enterprise at the time, or what?
It was in the original, it was called the Metropolitan Theater, and it was a for-profit company that morphed into what the then developers in Boston and the people who built it wanted to build, one of the wonder theaters of the world. And it's got the most incredible architecture, Ben, inside that is just like no other. And it then went through the 40s and the 50s, and it then became a Sack Cinema. And Ben Sack owned it, who was quite famous in the movie business, and it showed first-run movies. When I was a kid, I used to go there to see all the James Bond movies and all the other big movies that were coming out. But in between there, it started to have music. And in fact, that music was also being presented at that time by a young man who went to BU, who also, as of this day, is involved with the Hall of Fame. And he is one of our co-chairs, and that's Don Law. And then all of a sudden, there was music being played there. And that, again, was for profit. And then it went bankrupt. And it was falling apart, and in came a not-for-profit group called the Metropolitan Center, and they tried to revamp it to present the Metropolitan Opera and other major dance companies, and within 3 years, they went bankrupt. And then the rest has sort of been history. And we've been left, my legacy, and now Casey's responsibility is maintaining this building as one of the great landmarks in the world. And there are lots of artists that say, if I come to Boston, the only place I'm playing is the Wang, or I'd like to play the Wang.
Casey, how much pressure is that? Look, let me tell you, I know this from experience and research. Boston is the home of people who put great pressure. John Adams put great pressure on his John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams put great pressure on Charles Francis Adams. Joe has put great pressure on you. Let's not blow this, is what he's saying. Casey, this is my legacy here.
Yeah, and let's not blow this is a different term than I think about, but it's the same. But I don't think of it too much, Bob, because like Joe, I grew up here. I love Boston. I grew up going to the Wang as a kid. I've spent my entire career up to this point working to preserve and save these buildings. This is something that I have been passionate about for a long time. And so when the opportunity came to, when Joe said he was retiring, I was incredibly excited and interested in this opportunity. And a lot of it was because of FARHOF too, because the building itself is incredibly special. And historic theaters, that you can never build something like this again. And not only the architecture, but also what it does for the community. Joe referenced the education programs, all of the stuff that he built over decades and decades and decades. It's absolutely invaluable to the city, not to mention the $80 million economic impact that we have right on our neighborhood. It's astounding. But then the opportunity to take the foundation with FARHOF and to create a national arts platform that is, culturally important, that improves Boston as a city that I'm very passionate about, a place where, us Bostonians love our city, right? We just do, and we'll do anything to make it better and to make it cooler and to make it more relevant. And so that pressure, Bob, is something I really look at as a privilege. It doesn't mean that, there's plenty of nights that I don't sleep very well, and plenty of decisions that I have to wrestle with, and it's a big it's a big job, but it's really the honor of my life to have this opportunity. And it's something that I relish in and I enjoy very much.
Hear, hear, Casey. Well done.
I just think about this in the context of, the good music does and how it's something bigger than even just the music itself. I mean, downtown Nashville, where I live, just a few miles from my house is the Ryman Auditorium. And at one point they were thinking about tearing that place down. And
Yes.
then Emmylou Harris goes and records an album there and helps people remember. And now we have this iconic, again, like you can't replace it. And so thank you guys for doing that. I've been to Boston a couple of times, but thanks for doing that for the people of Boston and honestly for the people of the country and the world. Because these places, I mean, again, they ain't going to build these places again. They wouldn't make any sense.
When you walk in them, like I can speak as a performer, like walking on stage at, did we play at the Wang? Was it the Wang that we played at with Ringo?
Yep.
You look out like it's a city block. Like from the outside, it's a city block, It's just, this building. And then you walk in and it's like this magical, like you're walking in this twinkling, magical space that just seems so large, like it goes on forever. And it just, like you talked about the architecture, it is stunning. It is stunning to be there. Let's talk about the giving to the next generation, because that's what this is all about, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is all about passing on. My son, so I'm going to try to tell this story as condensed as possible. So one morning for breakfast, my son comes down. He's 14 now. He's probably, I guess he was 13. His hair is just way out. He's in this awkward 13, 14-year-old age. And I look at him and I'm like, you know what you look like? And I brought up on my phone Bob Dylan's Times There Are Changing album, where he's like wearing that shirt and it's just his hair is just like a finger in a light bulb. And literally he looked just like that. And he said, I want to see that movie. And this is when the Dylan movie was coming out. And I had been skeptical of that movie, because Dylan is so special to me. The music has played like millions upon maybe a billion people in this world today. Like the music has been very important in my development and from being a young teenager to this day, right? But he wanted to see it. So yeah, of course. So we went, my wife and I went. The movie starts, and the music comes. The first time the music comes on, I start crying. I get really I couldn't. I did not expect to be so emotional, but I just like lump in the throat, trying to hold it back, and the tears come, and I'm like, wow. And I just realized this is my life. Like this is just like it's your life, Joe, and it's your life, Ben, and it's your life, Casey. I was like watching this, like this is my life. This music is so wrapped up in my being now at this point at 54 years old that this is why music is important. This is why this music is important. And so talk about that, like trying to convey that. And, in this world of and I'm unlike a lot of people, I actually like some of the music that I'm hearing today, like that's coming out today. I'm optimistic.
I agree.
Ben's going to laugh at me because I am notoriously not optimistic as a person.
I'm not going to laugh at you. I'm going to encourage you, Bob. I'm going to encourage you.
I have expressed my optimism, but there is, because, through my kids, like I hear what's coming out today. And there was a time in my life where whatever was coming out, I reached like 25, 30, and I thought I knew everything about music. And I knew I was the person who determines what's good and what's bad. Like I'm the expert. But then, I'm on the other side of that, to where I'm really open. I'm really open to hearing the good in almost everything musically. So talk about how we connect the present to the past as far as like music that's being written today with that music of Bob Dylan and Pete Seeger, and that is so important to FARHOF and the mission.
One, I'm going to ask you a question before I answer you. I want to know what your son felt. My dad is crying. And
he's embarrassed. He's.
I don't think he was embarrassed. I don't think he was embarrassed.
Hopefully, you didn't see it.
Well,
Dad, you're stupid.
If he had, he would have been very proud of you. And the second thing I'm going to probably say is that he probably said afterwards, "Hey, Dad, that wasn't so bad. That music was pretty cool."
No, he definitely liked it. And in fact, I'll tell you this footnote to this whole episode. A few weeks or months later, I go in his room and he's got his earbuds in, and I said, "What do you listen to?" He won't tell me half the time what he's listening to. He won't. Like right now, I don't know. He won't. That's for him. He's not revealing. He's
Right.
not sharing. But I said, "What are you listening to?" He said, "Bob Dylan." I said, "What song?" He said, "Positively 4th Street." I was like, "Okay,
Okay. So
my work is done. My work is
So
done."
my experience is I'm exactly the same way you are about. I mean, I am a sappy soul. So
Yeah.
out comes the artist begins, and I'm like, oh my God, this music is me. This is what my whole
Yeah.
being is about. And I see that with my kids who are now, my oldest is 45. And, they do love all kinds of different kinds of music, but they also go back to the same old thing that we're talking about. To them, Lead Belly is not Roots, all right? But Black Eyed Peas might be, all right? So I think that the point I'm trying to make is that unless we perpetuate this, especially now. So, Bob, you've had a great career as being in a music business, but it's a real struggle for new singer-songwriters out there
It is.
in
Yeah.
this environment. And part of what Casey's doing with FARHOF is trying to promote that and give a way in which, we can continue to have this thing be relevant and that they can find a way to make a living at it. And I'll never forget Casey had arranged to have our documentary show at a particular theater called the Regent Theater in Arlington, Mass. As I remember, Casey, and we're sitting there on stage afterwards with a young artist who's great. His name is Mark Arelli, and Mark told the audience that I was nearly going to give up. When I got through COVID, I got myself up to be a B+ artist, and I was ready to go. And then all of a sudden, I couldn't make a living. And I was ready to give it up. And all of a sudden, I was invited to be a participant of the Folk Americana Roots Hall of Fame. And I went to a couple of exhibits and I looked at all that stuff and I said, no, this is my being. I'm going to continue to do this. And he's doing the same thing. He's out picking other new artists to look at how they can do that. And Passim's created the music called the Folk Collective. These were all new artists. And Black artists, Latino artists, gay artists, rap artists, hip hop artists, all doing what they thought was folk music, right? And so it's interesting how this is transpiring and very important. But I found with my kids that it was amazing to me that they told me, Dad, I know the Allman Brothers was your favorite band. They're mine too.
No, that's just, yeah, I don't think anything can beat that.
Speaking of this, I had one question I wanted to ask, and maybe it's not so much a question as just listen to this conversation. It strikes me that the story is one of migration. That movement, that people going from one place to the other, sharing ideas, finding community. Boston is not the point of origin for many of these musicians that we're talking about, but they find a home there. And the place helps them come up. And the musical instruments, the banjo, the guitars, the genres of music that we appreciate, they come together, and it's about movement. It's about people bringing what they have from one place to the other and it getting better by combining. And I wonder, when you think about this, am I right to see this? Because it feels to me like this story itself, without trying, has been a story of the kind of brilliance of the exchange of ideas and of people that migration brings.
Absolutely, Ben, and that's one of that. I think that is part of the story of Boston that we're trying to tell, right? But where you do have some of this incredible music that is from people from different backgrounds, from different countries, and they come together and they create, they break bread together, they make something new from their respective backgrounds. And I think that it also, we're showing people the lineage. It's almost like looking at your family tree, right? Where you identify as a musician, as an artist, as a songwriter, and you can see those that came before, and it really connects you with that human part of yourself that needs to know, who am I and what am I doing here and why do I feel this way? And there's been all these people that came here before me that did this, and it's important for me to continue to do this.
It's such a gift to be in on the board meetings. How many members are? I mean, it's a big group. It's a large
We've
group.
got just about 20 people on the board, and an additional large group of advisors who help with nominating and voting, and it's an expanding group, Bob.
And it's a to hear the anecdotes and the little stories that pop up, and to think like of the accomplishments of so many of the board members. It's just really it's always a lot of fun to be a part of, and I appreciate. I'm thankful to be a part of that group.
I just wanted to say to everyone listening, if you want to find out more, there will be links in the episode description for sure. But before we go, I want to make sure that you guys get a chance to share. Where can we find out more about what you're doing, the events that are going on, and how can people who want to become involved in this incredible community project, how can they find out more?
So we have our website is farhof.org, farhof.org. And we're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. You can find us on all the different social platforms. And getting email subscription, through the website is the best way to stay in touch with us, for any event. But, we've got our exhibit, Music America, that I spoke about, is going to be on display through the end of August. We have our next induction ceremony coming up on March 24th, which is going to be on the stage of the historic Wang Theater, which we're very, very excited about that event coming up. And you can see, so staying in touch with us through those social channels will keep you looped in as to what's going on.
Joe Spaulding, Casey Soward, thank you guys so much for joining us today on The Road to Now.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for listening to The Road to Now. If you enjoyed this episode, please tell the world by giving us 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts or 5 stars on Spotify. Or spread the word directly. Just text a friend maybe, or share a link on social media. Anything helps and we appreciate it. And if you've got a friend who hasn't gotten into podcasts yet, let them know they can hear us every weekend on SiriusXM's POTUS channel 124. Now is the time when we say our special thanks to our supporters on Patreon and give a shout out to our Washingtonians. That list is Tanya Marsh, Mary Hawking, Tim and Caitlin Wells, Fig White, Matt Williams, Team Martin, Ann Williams and Frank Edwards, Nate Farrer, Jennifer and Magnolia, Chris and Teresa Adams, Joy Avery, Edward Carlson, and Aaron and Derek Garrison. Thanks to all you guys for supporting us. If you want to support our work and maybe get on that list, you can join us on Patreon at patreon.com/theroadtonow. You'll get extended versions of select conversations, extra episodes, bonus materials, and more. That's all available at patreon.com/theroadtonow. For more on the show, visit our website, theroadtonow.com, where you can easily search our back catalog and quickly find links to content. Why is it so good? 7 Ages Design. That's who made it. If you're looking for a website, go check them out. The Road to Now is hosted and produced by Bob Crawford and me, Ben Sawyer. Our associate producer is Gary Fletcher. This episode was edited by Gary Fletcher, and our theme music, like pretty much always, was by Paul DeFiglia. For Bob Crawford, this is Ben Sawyer. Thank you for listening. Take care.